Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and I'm joined by this fine nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted, how are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Well, I just realized the cameras aren't mirrored, so I pointed it away from you instead of at you.
Well, it is what it is. That's why I try to avoid pointing.
uh, well, I failed that. I failed that insight check.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
I think the internet will forgive you.
Maybe the internet is a fickle place, my friend. So tonight we're going to be talking about campaign creation and maybe weighing in on some of our thoughts on the matter. Folks, if you want to jump in and ask questions about creating campaigns, we already got people in the chat. Robert there talking about the monk and what do we think about the monk class. The monk class is super thematic and fun, and you could even build campaigns around it if you wanted to. I mean, one of
Yeah,
our
I mean, we
favorite book series by R.A. Salvatore, which is a non-forgotten realms series. Actually, a keystone of that is um, an order of monks, and a lot of the stuff that happens is based on that.
the Abelican Order.
Yeah. So, and then, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could do your monk orders. They don't all have to be kind of Asian flavored, even though a lot of the D&D monk is very kind of Eastern in
Right.
nature.
So we've got a lot of different monk videos here on the channel. My one of my favorite series is the insert all you know party character class kind of things. And I think party of all monks would I think would probably be the most thematic style game, um, because each subclass of monk would bring its own flair and difference to the game, and because they could all be different orders that are coming together, you could have a lot of fun with something like that.
Maybe thematic, but probably not good. So,
Well,
not compared to the cleric or the paladin.
sure, yes, cleric and paladin I think would be the easiest style game to run because
Druid
of
does
of
pretty well
access to
too.
healing.
I think
um
I think the druid could rock it out pretty hard too. I mean, with the
sure.
druid, you get some of what you would get from having a sorcerer or a wizard. You can get the tankiness with wild shape, and then you get plenty of healing as well.
Right. Cleric and paladin I think are the easiest to run, because you can still have most of the party being tanks and healers at the same
Mhm.
time.
Right.
It's just going to have a lot of fights over the plate mail.
So that being said, what are your thoughts on campaign creation, or should we go through like the history of the world that we kind of play in now?
So like it depends upon, like, if you're talking campaign as in campaign setting, there's definitely a lot of things to take into account. And while we've talked a little bit about this on the channel, Chimes of Discordia, as we call it now, you know, kind of came about, in ways that have bent and twisted and shifted over the course of us playing, not only because of lost notes and Wizards of the Coast competitions and what have you, but some of it has been brought about just by mere play and saying, okay, well, the events of this campaign have now had a greater impact on the world hereafter.
Yeah, well, I would say, pardon me. One of the things about our style is our campaigns are very fluid in the sense that we are very open to including things that we had not thought of or anticipated in our games based on what our players want and what would be fun for them. Chimes of Discordia really just started off as our Ulfganya campaign back in AD&D, and D, and then going into 3.5, and Wizards of the Coast had launched a competition to build and design a campaign setting, and we already had a pretty big one already. So we're like, oh, we should submit our thing, which Keith Baker, curse you, Keith Baker, blew us out of the water with Evron. It was way better than what we came up with, to be honest with you. Although there are a lot of elements of Evron that were in my Shattered Realm campaign that I submitted separately from what we did as a group as well. So that was kind of cool.
Absolutely. And we can possibly, think like, oh, well, maybe they read our ideas, they liked it, and they incorporated elements from, all these different places to put it into Eberron. And it's up to, whatever headcanon you want to believe as to whether or not, you know, the ideas of lonely little us, you, whatever, are in the published works of Eberron.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Keith Baker is a genius, and they had also a lot of really smart, creative people working on that. So, uh,
And I'm fully willing to accept that. But if it makes you feel a little bit better, you could be like, well, there's a chance.
there's a chance. Then there's a chance. Plus, also they got a lot of submissions, so they had a lot of shit they could have cherry picked.
Indeed. And that's why I think it's possible that they're like, well, we can take the bones of
Yeah,
whatever concept we like the best, and then, as you say, cherry pick from the things that are, brought
yeah.
into them, that are submitted to them, to be able to say, well, I like this little bit of concept here, and I like this little bit of concept there. And, short of having a conversation with, the people involved, there's no real way to know for sure. And, I'm not going to get up on a soapbox and be like, yes, they put our idea, they put Dave's idea,
So,
into ever.
so that being all that being said, are like there are some cool things about the world that we came up with, but at the end of the day, it was a very generic fantasy setting. In hindsight, we had all been into the Last of the Renshai at the time, so we kind of were like doing this law chaos thing, in some of it, which isn't wholly unique. And our twist on it wasn't particularly that interesting in hindsight. But going forward, fast forwarding to the campaign setting and campaigns we played in now, it influenced it heavily. But then also, like I think it was Ryan that maybe had the idea that what if Chimes of Discordia is our Ulfganya campaign, but it's going to become the Shattered Realm campaign. And how does that happen? Well, Shattered Realm, the concept was the world basically explodes, and in mid explosion, magic is used to kind of pull it back together, but it doesn't quite get it right. So you have all these floating land masses and continents, and this other sea that everything is kind of mixed up in. And it has this kind of like rings of land. And it gets frozen there, and that's Shattered Realm. But we're like, well, how do we get to that point? So with Chimes of Discordia, we came up with this concept that there's all these different ages. Again, nothing unique there because every setting does that. But what we did is like said, oh, well, what signals the end of an age? And in our world, the signal is the gods are like, oh, we really botched this up. They open a pocket dimension, push it all in, and shut it. Right. And, so every age ends that way. The problem is, as we get closer to the modern, Chimes of Discordia that we've been playing in, the barriers between these dimensions are becoming thinner and thinner and causing chaos, magic to seep out from the kind of the fabric that's holding everything together. And that was kind of like the unique thing about Chimes of Discordia is there's these chaos storms that would be unleashed upon the world, and they would have very dramatic effects. It could be something that happens really fast, instantaneous, or it could be long lasting. And we started playing with that and building things up around that. And that informed a lot of what we did. Matter of fact, you know, in Ulfganya, in our world, Griffin Gaff became our like main settlement that we used, and it kind of started off real small, but people were there because they wanted to prospect for what happens with these chaos storms, but at the same time a couple of these barriers became really thin and opened up to other worlds, so it became this nexus point between a realm of dragons, a realm of clockwork creatures, basically our warforged, and became this like mass trading hub and blew up really fast. And then in addition to that, a monster was released from like a prison's transport in the next closest city, destroying it and driving all the survivors and refugees out, many of which found their way into Griffin Gap. So it just had this boom of populations and all this stuff going on. And some of that, a lot of that came about during play. It didn't start at that point.
There's the mentions of Chimes of Discordia, and I feel like we can't go too much further without talking about what those things are. And I don't know if we've determined whether there's a set number or not, but the concept of the chime is that something is happening to cause the destruction of this world. And it's a world that is a super planet, if you will. We actually have, unique cosmos that shouldn't in any way, shape, or form be able to exist, because we've got a mega planet that's got 5 moons and 2 suns that orbit it. But that's just because we decided to be silly and make a more interesting cosmos to,
With
well, I guess to be
our
different.
polar equator.
So we've got a polar equator, and we've got the central planet here. The suns do this so that almost never can you ever see 2 suns at a time. But if we want to play with celestial things, we like, oh well, how do the moons work, and how do the suns work, and how can we muck about with things to make things more interesting in the stellar sky. But the chimes, they represent some drastic event that gets closer towards the destruction of the planet. And in my campaign, I actually ran a game, around a 12 session story arc where the players were going up against a wizard. And the wizard wound up having some kind of elder god patron that he reached out for power. And at the end of the campaign, they slew this wizard, but before he could die, he actually called up to the heavens and pulled a meteor out of the sky and crashed it into the planet. And a chime went off at that point in time, causing a number of chunks of the world to begin floating up. So now there's multiple floating continents or chunks of landmass, which change a number of things in the world. And I ran a campaign called Repercussions, where they got to visit some of these locations and deal with the ramifications. And one of the players actually, got to high enough level that he used his divine intervention to bring one of these chunks back down to the ground. And that was the kind of part of an epilogue of that game. And it was fun to have these kind of moments. But now, like, you know, what is the fallout of having these floating continents, and what is that going to cause for the future of this game? But with us trying to bring it eventually towards Shattered Realm, like, I imagine more of these things are happening. And people probably remember the day that the earth shook. And now I describe the sky occasionally having more of a Saturn or Jupiter ring of detritus that went up into the sky after one, maybe more of these meteors hit. um sure, there's only so many places that thing could hit and not cause planet-wide devastation, but we're talking about magic, so some things have to be bent and twisted.
We have a question. And probably pronouncing that wrong, but do you have any advice for getting your players to help create a campaign setting?
So first off, I would say, like, do you have a building point, a starting point? Do they have any interest, or is this just like, all right, I want to do this all together, and they're like, I'm not really into it. You can't force people to be into something if they're not. But if you're looking to make a campaign world that everybody wants to play in together, I would just start off and ask, what is it that you're into, and just start asking questions and writing everything down. And once you have a lot of information, then you can say, well, how do we make this all work together? Are you looking for a modern game? Are you looking for a fantasy game? Are you looking for something that's post-apocalyptic? Start off with the broader strokes. Start off with your genre and build out from there. Are you looking to have, lots of different cultures, or is this a small thing?
So when we start a new campaign, we pretty much always do a session 0, and whoever's going to run the game, the GM generally will throw out a handful of ideas. What me and Ted have been doing. So this way, it gives players a choice of what kind of game we're going to play in, and me as the DM make sure it's a game I actually want to run. Um, both things very important. Game they want to play, game you want to run. And from there, you can start asking, well, what is it they want to see? What is it about this particular choice that intrigued them? Right? That's kind of your big picture of what do you want to see in this world, right? And then the other place you could go is with their backstories, like, hey, where is your character from? Tell me about this place. In my Under the Dome game, I had several characters that wanted there to be a gladiatorial arena, and they wanted to be from fighting schools. So three of the characters decided that, and that wasn't something that was originally in my game, but because they wanted it, I added it in, and so now that's a big part of it. It's actually become a bigger part of the game. It went from nothing to, oh, there's these handful of schools for gladiators, but outside of those, the main houses, the barons of the city all have their own like sanctioned fighting schools as well. So it's more room for like political intrigue and things of that nature to happen. But just you like I said, you just start off small and ask them things about their characters that they would want to see in the world. You got a character that wants to, some kind of gunslinger. Well, that suggests black powder or similar technology. Is that a thing that's in a particular region of your world, or are they the only ones that have it? Did they invent it and create it? Right. So right there, that changes everything. If you decide no, there's this place in this world where they use black powder weapons and firearms. So they're going to wage war way different than someone who doesn't have access to that technology. And so what is that place like? So and have they advanced in other technologies as well? So right then and there, now you're adding details to your world and your campaign setting. So, but I would just say, like, ask them, like, do you guys want to be a part of this? Do you want to be involved? How much do you want to be involved? What is it you want to see in the game? That's like a biggest thing. Like, if they want there to be a lot of undead in the game, right? For whatever reason, then you as the GM have to come up with a reason why there's a lot of undead. If you're willing to go along with that. Like, I had a session 0 where one player was like, no, I don't see troglodytes in D&D enough. I want troglodytes. And I built a whole campaign arc off of troglodytes because the player said, hey, and sometimes they'll get thrown out ideas and it'll just inspire you to do different things. And and that game was a lot of fun, and also like it bled into other games. And in that particular, like, I'm like, well, why is there troglodytes? How are they involved? Well, I had an alchemist that was capturing troglodytes and harvesting their glands to make a drug from them. And there was a
Called
side,
stank.
yeah, called stank, and then you would inject it. And one of the side effects of stank was if you went through withdrawal and couldn't get it, you would metamorphose into a troglodyte. So Griffin Gaff ended up with a stank tank where they would put people that were going through withdrawal so they wouldn't turn into troglodytes and rip people apart.
So that campaign is on the channel if you want to go check it out. Dave ran a 60 some episode story arc with some amazing players, and it was a lot of fun. I watched the campaign arc a couple of times. It's a really great role playing, really great story. But yeah, when you have something that somebody wants to be involved, there's always ways to how can I incorporate this into the game. Dave mentioned, oh, there's lots of undead. Well, are there powerful necromancy or necromancers in the world, or is necromancy more potent in certain areas? Is there a cursed land like there is in Eberron where things that die automatically rise? Does this prompt anything to be like, oh, look, there are undead slayers that, wander these areas, just to try and destroy these undead and try to find ways to end it permanently. Back in the second to third edition days, like, one of my favorite characters was an undead slayer in Dave's game. And he's one of the things that I would love to kind of recreate for fifth edition and play, but it would have to be probably with Dave as the DM to bring Tull back to life. Not that he died permanently.
He's in
We just kind
limbo.
of ended the game that he was in.
Yeah, I mean, like, hey, maybe you're one of those DMs or players that feel like necromancers don't have to be evil. Well, you could do that in your campaign. You could build that around it and decide why they're not evil and why zombies and skeletons in your world are not evil like they are in the monster manual. And you could totally make that a thing. Maybe there's a necropolis, and that's why there's so many undead in that particular world. And maybe they're like everybody else. Some of them are good and some of them are bad.
You could very easily have a world where the workforce, just can't handle doing manual labor in wherever the city is. So when you die, your body is gifted off to the necropolis or the necromancy tower, where they are raised to be these mindless workers. And sure, maybe some people are evil necromancers that exploit the process, and maybe sometimes occasionally the undead are pulled away from their standard just build and move stuff
Mhm.
to actually be warped into evil creatures and turned into whatever. The game is meant to be whatever it is that you want to turn it into. We've got plenty of things on the channel that talks about how undead are standardly evil, so therefore necromancy is evil. But if you don't want to play that world, if you don't want to play that game, like, you don't have to. Like,
You can change the rules.
you can go in another direction and change the story for your game.
I I I definitely see an organization popping up like PETA, but for the rights of the recently deceased, and you can you cannot enslave them to do they fight for their rights to not be enslaved to do that manual labor that you discussed.
Society for the uh Society for the Promotion of Undead Welfare. What would that be? The SPU UW.
Something
Would
like
that we
that.
spoke?
You got to make it spawn. You got to make spawn work somehow. Um, it's spun. But
But like that, and that's just looking at undead. Like Dave did a great job with troglodytes. A lot of times when I run games, I like to theme it in some way, shape, or form. Either because, like, oh, I've got some cool minis I want to use, or some cool terrain I want to use. Other times it's like, okay, well, like, my first fifth edition game was very demonic heavy. They were up against a demon lord, and it was a demon lord that I fully created, and I hadn't even thought about like what it was, but I happened to get a really interesting, you know, large mini, and I'm like, yeah, this thing is, properly sick looking. Let me put this thing as Narcitus, even though like its spawn had been with orc and ogre kind. This thing was like a giant worm like monstrosity that I look that way because it's over there on the shelf. But it was like a Reaper mini that I don't even know what it was called, but It looked really cool, and I was happy to, you know, beat the snot out of some heroes before they brought it down.
I would say too, like one of the best pieces of advice that I got from anywhere when it comes to world building, campaign creation, and really there's a lot of overlap between the two unless you're playing in a pre-written world, right? So, and that is to start off small and just expand out from there. And really everything we've done has been through that model anyway for the most part. Yeah, like matter of fact, a lot of the reasons why we pull things in from our previous campaigns just because like we're building out and that's already been made, so we just pull it in and be like, okay, that makes this easier than coming up with something new whole cloth.
So Dave and I started running, our Griffin Gaff games, here on the channel, and both games have got, the videos that you can go play. Quality's not great because they're recorded home games, and we were still learning about how to do things, or in that case, not to do recorded home games for
Yeah.
us. Um, but when we started off, it was just we were kind of working off of just this thing. And as we built and came up with ideas, we needed more things to work with. So, like, my character was worshiping, a god that didn't exist in our previous iteration. So, like, I've thought after the fact of, okay, well, how does this fit and how does this work? And even though they didn't exist when, we were playing years ago, and even in the nearer future, I started kind of taking notes and creating new gods and rearranging some of the old gods. Well, I now have a document that is about the pantheon, and like it started off small, and within the last 6 months it's now 115 pages long. That is just in a Google Doc about the gods of our world, broken down into different pantheons, and every single one has, like, what their areas of influence are, what their worship rites would look like. I It's written with the term artifact, but it's really like relic items of importance, to them, what kind of relationships some of them have, all of this stuff as I just kind of slowly built out, all of these things. And, you know, I still know that there's probably areas, even with 115 pages, there's probably areas that I didn't quite cover. And our home game,
I have no
uh,
idea what the hell Ted has in that document.
well, I would share it to you, but I don't think you're gonna care.
Mm.
I'll probably give everybody, because we're going to actually play a an all cleric game, and even more so, we're going to play an all dwarf cleric game when Dave's Under the Dome game is done. But I mean, I've got a list here of, like, just all the deities, and I'm gonna just be like, okay, guys, here are your options. Do with
Mm.
as you will. And if somebody comes back and says, oh well, I want to do this, this subclass or this concept, and I don't see something for that, I will work with that person to come up with a deity and fill that role, and figure out what pantheon they belong in. Are they in the true pantheon, the awakened, the traveling deities, or the radiant emergent pantheon? Yeah. So I
They're cracking me up in the chat here. We got tomfoolery. Why are we joking when uh for for I think that's gonna be us. We won't even be able to retire when we die. Talking about the undead. And
oh
then yeah, and then it's in capitalism. If they can make it happen, believe me, they would. Um,
oh.
and then Tally, Google Docs sounds so much better than Manifesto.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys have any interest for me to, share any of this on the website, like I said, I wouldn't be like, oh, let's put 115 pages, like, out there, but maybe as a, send the teaser of the different deities, and maybe make a
You do like
downloadable.
individual god write-ups or something.
Yeah, I mean, I could do a lot. Like I said, I've got a lot here. I've had some, I've had a lot of fun with it. But cleric is my class of choice. I've played quite a lot of them over the many years of playing. And I feel in a world where the gods exist and can truly manifest by giving others their powers or what have you, we know they exist. So why would you not worship them? And therefore, they come with built-in role-playing tools and crutches. They come with things of, oh well, I don't know what to do right now. Oh well, what does my faith tell me I should do? Okay, let me do this. If you've got duties of the followers or duties of the priesthood, you could be like, okay, well, this is what I make sure I do on the holy days, or every time I walk into a town or a house, or you follow those little nuggets. And especially if you're not you know good at role playing, or if you're new to role playing, these are little nuggets to follow that make your character stand out when you're doing things. And for those reasons, I'm like, all right, this makes a whole lot of sense. So I just have fun with it.
So, yeah, I was kind of thinking too, like one campaign that I'm running now is under the dome, and that started basically because I was like, hey guys, how do you guys feel about playing a Mad Max style motorcycle gang in D&D? Um, which again, it was like one of four options, and it was the one that kind of had the most intersection. But like that was the impetus for me. It's like, I want to play a game and I want to use the Devil's Ride from Out of the Abyss, and I want players to be able to play with those and have fun. But I was like, oh, but I really don't want them to run off souls. How could I do this? And then I was like, well, you know what? What if it was kind of a post-apocalyptic, and I took the Chimes of Discordia setting and said, well, what happened if the world was like completely ravaged by these chaos storms and making it very hard to live and almost inhospitable? And matter of fact, the stuff that these motorcycles runs off of is kind of like a byproduct of these chaos storms. How would that all work? And I started putting that together. So there Ghost Rider. So there are so many there you just make a ghost that's a drider. That kind of but there are so many ways to kick off a campaign or your world building. Any little nugget of inspiration can just blossom into a full world. And again, like if you take some ideas that you really like and go back to the earlier question, how do I get my players involved? One is like, say, like, here's 5 ideas, which ones do you guys like best? And whatever one has the most cross intersection amongst them, you take that one, and then you have your session 0. You're like, well, what do you guys think this looks like? Here's some like, generally what I would do is, here are some things you could do in this setting, or pitch me something. And and then at session 0, you then like start building out what they want to see in the world. So they start filling in areas and having directions that maybe you didn't necessarily see happening. And I know for that campaign, at some point, I decided, like, almost every session, I tried to run a different style of game, whether it's political, mystery, dungeon crawl, whatever. And you know that's been a challenge, and that's been a lot of fun for me. So there's different things you can do in order to kind of like stimulate your imagination.
All right. So you said number one, you said something. So I gotta make a comment here. This time tomorrow, if you've got nothing actually going on, because Dave, you said Mad Max. I'm gonna be appearing in a one shot, literally on a Mad Max style game, using the Mecha Hack system over on Erasmus Expedition. I'll be sharing the link once I have it on our social media so that you guys can kind of follow me from Facebook over to there, or you can just head to Erasmus Expedition. Like I said, this time tomorrow, 8:30 Eastern or 7:30 Central, to go check that out. I'm really excited to try out yet another system. I've heard a lot of good stuff about Mecha Hack, and this will be my first foray into it. And we're styling the mechs as our vehicles for a Mad Max style game. I don't really know much. Like, I've watched the movies, everything but Furiosa, but I don't really know much about what the GM is, planning for us. But we are a cadre, we're a group that are, going to have to survive in whatever things he's got going on. So if you're interested, come follow me over there and check it out. Other thing is, we've crossed the halfway point, and I've kind of been sitting on these, but we've had some stuff coming up, and I haven't had a chance to show them off. But the Game Master series that's over on Amazon. There's the Book of Legendary Dragons, Random Encounters, Traps, Puzzles, Dungeons, the non-player characters, the Book of Villains, Minions, and their Tactics, as well as some cookbooks and some other things. They sent me a set to offer up to some of you wonderful people out there. So these are going to be added into our giveaway shelf. Probably be broken up into several sections, because this is a very heavy set if I was going to send all of this to one individual. So let's see here. There's got five. There's 9 books here. This is probably going to be 3 to 4 giveaways here. So somebody will get some good stuff over the next several months of some cool giveaways that Nerdarchy does.
That's a nice stack.
Indeed, like I said, there's a lot of great stuff. I've flipped through and seen some things there, and I kind of worked out some arrangement that as they come up with some new stuff, they're going to send it our way to increase those giveaways. So I know there's some stuff that's coming up, and I don't know what I'm at liberty to say and not at liberty to say. So I'll keep my mouth closed. But I know there's some pretty big names that they're working with that are going to be coming down the pike eventually.
Is it you, Ted? Are you the big name?
Uh, I'm trying to see if there's something that I can be involved with, but no, names that are bigger than I.
It ain't so. Also, if you guys are interested in playing D&D with Ted or myself in a castle, but maybe you don't have a passport, or you don't want to travel to another country, uh, August 18th to the 22nd, we're both running a campaign. Ted will be running 24 hours of D&D. I don't know what his campaign is going to be yet. I think he's doing something with Chimes of Discordia. I will
Definitely.
be running 36 hours of D&D in the hardcore mode in a game called Valhalla Awaits, and it starts off with you died, but don't worry, things get better from there, maybe. And the end of the world is coming, known as Ragnarok. So if you wanted to check that out, there are links in the description. It's not cheap, but it is a super awesome vacation where you get to play D&D with us. And there'll be some other
Indeed.
cool people
I'm
there
really
too.
looking forward to it. I will absolutely be doing something in Chimes of Discordia. I'm in fact, in process of, writing a blog post to talk about some of the different options that I'm looking at. Uh, but I always like to try and incorporate the things that my players want to do. I feel like a lot of DMs for D&D in a castle, they come and say, "Oh, this is what I'm running," and then incorporate, from there. Whereas I'm more interested to know what you want as a player, and then I'll make that happen, because that's just that's the game that I tend to run. So I'm working on a blog post that will get out there and have some more information to work with.
Nice. Also, our friends at Easy Roller Dice, if you want to snag yourself some nifty dice, there's links in the descriptions for them, as well as a one-time promo code for 25% off. Go check them out. We love the folks at Easy Roller Dice. With that, let's jump back in. So, what do you think, Ted? Man, what's your number one go to for coming up for inspiration for campaign building?
So realistically, because there is so much out there, is to just be a nerd. Watch movies, read books, uh, have conversations with, other nerds, and wherever inspiration decides to take you, build off of that. I take inspiration from everywhere. It sometimes can come from a word in a conversation. I've had the strangest of thoughts in the most unlikely of places, and be like, okay, this is something that I think could be really cool to work with for this campaign, or for a potential campaign down the road. Whether you're watching any one of the Marvel movies or Lord of the Rings, there are elements that are just going to be just so impactful that you're like, all right, I want to replicate that, or I want to do something, that has nothing to do with this, except this moment here was just so cool. How do I take inspiration from there? If you're into reading, there are more novel series that I could recommend than we have time left to talk about, that are just so amazing and unique. And literally any single one of them could spark a campaign that is just going to be awesome, or a campaign world that could be awesome. So it really comes down to what you talked about. What do you feel like doing, and how do you normally get inspired, and go from there.
I will mention one pitfall though that I think we've fallen into in the past, and that is sometimes letting your players dictate to you what kind of game you run.
Sure.
Now it's not terrible, but what can happen is if you're not excited about the game as they are, you can lose interest, and that begins the show. And we have so many campaigns that have died because of that reason. And that's also why we structure our games a lot differently now than we used to, because we've had so many, forgotten campaigns that just never finished. They just kind of fizzled out. Bless you. And because we have more structure in the way we design our games now, we usually set a number of sessions, and then set out to end it in that particular time. Now, when we get to the end, sometimes we can like re-up if everyone's still enjoying the game. But I think it helps a lot to have a definitive start and end to your campaigns and your games. And for us, it has been one of the few things that has allowed us to finally see campaigns to fruition and have them actually have a satisfying ending instead of just kind of like fizzling away.
So like our games that we run here on the channel, we run excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my throat. Um, but we run 12 session story arcs, and we rotate GMs. We play weekly, everybody has a blast. And even if you don't have a concrete, here is the outline of here's every single session plotted and planned out, because you don't want to, railroad or steamroll them across the whole thing. You at least have a start and an end of what you're looking for.
Yeah, and also too, it's like in that session zero, whenever you can incorporate things that the players come up with, like you're gonna have a lot less issue with them losing interest in the game, with them, not following the plot hooks, right? Like one of the biggest thing we hear all the time, in comments and questions is, like how do I get players to take my plot hooks? And like, the step one is remove, the word my from that, and insert their, because if you can come up with plot hooks that they've actually come up with, nothing makes your players bite faster or harder than just feeding their ideas back at them.
Right. Uh,
And it's less
you
work.
know, and the concept of, oh, my plot hooks, this is a collaborative storytelling game. If you've got 4 players and a DM, you have 5 people at the table. All of you are telling the story together. And if you have a session zero, when you talk about the kind of story that you want to tell, your job as the DM is to give their character something to do in your campaign world. and they're going to bite on whatever hooks that they're going to do. Now, yes, there's the meme out there of how frustrating is it that, you game once a month and, you want to get out there and see a story, and this dude next to you just wants to do a 2 hour shopping spree, and how challenging those can be. Sure. Um, but if you talk about those moments in session zero and you can get everybody onto the same page, maybe that 2 hour shopping trip can be knocked down to a half hour, and then, everybody can join in, the hour and a half of story, or, whatever it is that you're going to do. But by having the option of, I'm going to throw out plot hooks until the players bite on something, you then have the capability of bringing things to a more satisfying situation, because everybody's involved and everybody's going to bite the hooks that's more appealing to them. You don't have to plan every little thing, just plan for what they decide to bite and nibble on.
Yeah, and also too, like for me personally, one of the things that I had to get over too was just abandoning my ideas along the way. Like in the middle of a campaign when like your players just go in a different direction. It is so much easier to abandon your ideas even if you put work into it than it is to try and iron gauntlet them back into the path that you want, and in generally not really particularly satisfying for anybody. I mean, that's
Yeah,
been
it,
my
it
experience anyway.
it is challenging, and you, even though it's session zero technically can come before session one, a session zero can happen at any point in time. I mean, I've had times across multiple games where the DM has said, okay, I need to regroup here and I need to figure out where things are for this game. And after a brief conversation, everybody is, back on board. And sometimes it's a, hey, we've kind of gotten, off the rails here. Is this still the story that you want to look at? Or, are we going, in a whole new direction? Sometimes it's a scenario where, like, you know, their player and DM aren't on the same page. So it's just a couple of questions back and forth. Okay, everybody's aware of where things are, and we move forward. There's lots of different ways to look at it, and there's no problem whether you do this mid-session, in between sessions, after a session. Whatever you have to do, just to make sure that everybody's having a grand old time and everybody's still on the same page, because it's the collaborative game, and everybody, DM and players included, should be having fun, because if you're not having fun, you're missing rule one.
Yeah, everyone's busy. There's a lot of stuff we could be doing with our time, so you know exactly basically what Ted said. And like we've definitely in our own games have been in the middle of our sessions and or in the middle of a campaign and all right, we're going to do session 0 again, or we're going to touch base and see what's going on, and make sure everyone's still on the same page, everyone's still having fun. you know it's not a bad idea to check in at the midpoint someplace and make sure this is what everyone still wants to do. And
Indeed.
like,
And there's always ways to make changes. If some, or most of the players aren't happy, they want to keep the characters the same, but want to go off in a new direction. Maybe an element that was discussed previously, oh well, let's tap into that. And the party goes off and does something else. Like, maybe you have to take, okay, we'll end the session early tonight and we're going to go off, and next time we'll come back and we'll go to that situation. We'll go check out that town and see where that story goes. Like, there's no problem with abandoning everything that you've done previously and going in another direction, because that's where the players and the characters want to go for it, man. Nothing is set in stone just because you, the DM, thinks, oh, well, this is what I had, set up in advance.
that is so true. um what do you think are some what if we just like throw out some quick like campaign starter ideas?
So, I mean, we've done a number of these on the channel, and I've got a lot of different things that I'm thinking about and percolating on. Um, just based off of some recent conversations that I've had. Uh, a game that is entirely a game of lycanthropes. That is something that has recently recrossed my path that I am percolating on.
Yeah, I know you've mentioned that. Too bad lycanthropes are kind of lame in 5e compared to previous editions,
Right, but that
but it
that
also
makes
makes them more manageable.
it makes it more manageable and makes it makes it far
Mm.
easier to be like, okay, well, I'm going to play this game and I don't have to worry about, oh my god, these dudes are like super overpowered, how do I deal with X, Y, and Z? But that is definitely like at the forefront of my brain of either to run and or play, because I'm super into lycanthropes, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm playing a 15-year-old werewolf on Jake's channel.
Has nothing to do with your love of Teen Wolf.
All right, what do you got as a throw off?
A campaign start, like, so you can go with anything. You could take any fairy tale and turn that into a starter quest adventure. Um, anything from the Brothers Grimm works just fine. You can pull some Hansel and Gretel. If you want to throw some hags into the mix, but you can, you start off slow, build up to it with just like missing children, and having the players, investigate a spooky forest. Matter of fact, some really great quest ideas. I don't know the name of the farmer, but Ted did like a series of blog posts, and he used the same farmer for everything. And it's like this farmer has the worst luck ever. It's over on the website. Do you know what that was? That series?
Ah, man, that was a really long time ago that I was writing those.
Was it for
Was it
minis? Where
Farmer
you
Maggot?
what was the name?
Was it Farmer Maggot?
Farmer Maggot.
I mean that is the name that popped into my head. It could be wrong, it could be right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, my brain is like a sieve on some things. So um,
But like that is like a perfect example of like taking just like, local homegrown style uh adventures. And I'm trying to see how you spell it. I'm going with maggot, but I don't know if that's how you spelled it.
well, I would just look on the channel for farmer, and sure, some of our out of the box encounters are going to come up, but there's bound to be other things as well. Um, but since I mentioned out of the box encounters, there's some great campaign starters in there as well. Lots of those things can be built off into either connected together or brought into other things from there. Um, Yeah, if you look at any of the standard fantasy video games that you've played, like how any of those things start are going to be great campaign starters because they already have. They've been video gameized. Whether there's something going on with the prince or the princess or what have you, you could tie into different myths and legends, whether it be something that already exists or something that you want to come up with. I'm going to go really cheesy here, but my daughter has recently started rewatching Disney's Gummy Bears,
Uh-huh.
and the gummy bears in that are like, oh, they're just a myth, they're a legend. Gummy bears don't exist. Well, like, sure, you don't have to use little tiny bouncing bears that drink, magical potions to bounce as your myth or legend. But like, what if you went with something else? What if you went with, something that is a cryptid from our world, or make up your own and like have that be like a legit thing, and like somebody is willing to pay serious money for proof, and you get into this heavy investigative low level game, and I forget exactly where it's from, but one of the cryptids, I saw a thing recently, that was like the 50 most popular cryptids by state, So like it picks one cryptid per, per US state, and one of them is the jackalope. And growing up, my grandfather had a jackalope, like, set up, taxidermy style, mounted on the wall. And um I was like, okay, could totally do a thing. Like, well, what if the jackalope really existed? Is it a magical creature that, doesn't like to be, captive? And for those that aren't familiar, it's kind of a cross between a deer and a rabbit. I think that could be a cool thing. So I've been debating, recently, of like, well, what would I want to do with this? How would I want to incorporate something that looks to be nothing more than just a mix of two animals, but how can I make it more special than that? So, magical ingredients and that kind of stuff, just like, in and of itself.
So I don't think you actually named the farmer. I think Doug had headcanon going with these articles that weren't really connected, but they were loosely connected, of it all
Sure.
being the same farmer. I
Well, I
put I
mean,
put a link to one of them in the chat there, so folks can go check it out if they like. Uh,
I'm all about, having this thing all be the same dude who's just got horrible luck.
with and it's funny because you used abyssal chickens. His chickens were being replaced with abyssal chickens, which I think is hilarious.
That
Because
was a good one.
I think I had I did something similar, but ice goblins were sneaking into the farmer's coop
Hmm.
and was turning his chickens into a variant of cockatrices,
Okay.
but they were like ice cockatrices instead.
I did a similar thing in my home game where the players came up with a stupid idea to to just get a whole bunch of chickens, and they were going to sell eggs. They thought this was going to be far more profitable than
Adventuring.
going off and adventuring. And newsflash, it wasn't. But the feed that they got had these, stone pellets, and they never really uh figured out where the stone pellets were coming from.
Hmm.
But the chickens that were eating these stone pellets were turning into cockatrices, and then like mating with the regular chickens. And it was creating these like half breeds and all kinds of problems. And, I went with this direction because a cockatrice bite is not lethal. You only stay stoned for so long.
24
Um,
hours. Yeah.
yeah, but it, for a fairly low level game, I thought this would be a fun, like, nuisance idea. And it wound up occupying like portions of sessions for like 3 or 4 sessions until, like, they finally were like, we need to nip this in the bud. And they actually got somebody to come in and investigate and, deal with it. And, I wound up incorporating our Circle of the Stone Gaze druids, because they can basically be immune to petrification at a certain level. Be like, all right, I'll deal with these guys. We'll take these off your hands. And the players, got to see the end of this story. That was like something that they entirely came up with, the aspect of the cluckery, as they called it. Um, but it was a scenario that, like, all right, this is now resolved, and they were thrilled to just be like, yay, we can just have regular chickens again.
Kids are weird.
Well, it's a kids game. I mean, what do you expect?
Well, that's why I say kids are weird. They want to do weird stuff in D&D. What happened in the good old days when they just want to kill monsters and take their stuff? Now they want to start chicken businesses.
And sell four-pronged fish hooks,
And sell four-pronged fish. But
also known as forks.
we are coming up on the end here, and unless there are any more questions or comments, we'll be back.
Uh,
Yeah,
Yep, I would just say, come on back Tuesday night and see the finale of Dungeons and Delving season 2.
I
Players
guess
just might be finally getting out of this nonsense.
I guess we can tease what's coming next here too. So after
Oh
Ted's
yeah.
done, game is over. We're gonna take 2 weeks off like we normally do between games, and then I'm gonna run a 4E Gamma World, and we will be the players will be playing in the Mutant Mayhem Ball League, where they will travel from settlement to settlement to square off against other Mutant Mayhem Ball League opponents and teams, all in all in search of winning the coveted prize at the end, the trophy, the championship. And I'm sure some other shenanigans will happen along the way. There will be all kinds of crazy wackiness because it's Gamma World. There will be mutations. There will be strange tech. There will be uh, violence and bloodshed along with ball games. It is going to be think rugby meets basketball with a smattering of Blood Bowl all mixed in there for good measure. So with that, until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.